Agenda for the day. What does this mean in more detail? We'll talk through that. And then I want to give you guys some ideas of how to actually create a culture of empathy. It's such an important concept to think about as you are an employee in your organization or a leader. There are so many different ways that you can help to create that culture of empathy. There are certainly benefits to the employer and the employee. So we'll talk through some of that as well. And then I'm going to give you guys some scenarios that I've personally navigated, and I'm sure in the chat you all can share as well some different scenarios that you might be navigating either as an employee yourself or as a leader of someone on your team. Now, keep in mind, if you're sharing those, keep everybody's privacy intact, right? We know that. But in general, what are some of the types of scenarios you're dealing with that are challenging in the workplace? And then last but not least, this is going to be probably the best portion of the course today, because I want to give you guys actual tools in your tool belt you'll be able to take back. It's always my intention with training programs to give you a resource that you can actually use, that it's not just something we're talking through, but it's actual strategy. So we'll talk about actual, programs you can take to implement in your workplace right away. All right. So humanizing the workplace. Employees are not just a number, they're a human being. And I know this sounds so cliche and so obvious, but I'll give you guys an example of why this is so important. I literally just got off an interview with a candidate. I'm interviewing for a company that's a client of ours, and we're looking for the unicorn, right? We're looking for that rock star candidate to fill this role. She tells me what she's looking for is to not feel like a hamster on the hamster wheel. In her current role, she feels like that, and she doesn't feel valued. She feels like a number, and she does not feel like she's being treated like a human being. So she's looking for that company that is going to humanize the workplace. So that is so important. Every single candidate I talk to wants that. They desire that more than ever. And especially after all the pandemic years that we went through, this is even more important to candidates. And it's important through the recruiting process, but it's important to engage and retain the employees and help them feel that they are a human being, that they're not just a number, that you actually care about them in your organization. The other important piece of humanizing the workplace is if you're a leader of people, managers are seen as servant leaders. They're not micromanagers. And believe it or not, there's still a lot of micromanagement that I see in the workplace. And if you are a people leader, I would highly recommend tapping into your team to ask them, what can I do to get out of the way? What can I do to help you do your job better? If you're not asking that question and you are leading a single person or a team of 100, it's an excellent question to ask. It's something I was taught years ago, and so I love still asking that of my colleagues, my team, what can I do to get out of the way to help you do your job better, faster? How can I help you be happier in your job? And then empathy is involved in every single decision, in my opinion, these days. And there are so many different things that we can talk about in this regard. I'll share a slide with you that is near and dear to my heart about empathy in a second here, but if we're just looking at things black and white these days, we're missing the human element, and there are so many different scenarios that require situational decision making. So just keep that in mind, as empathy is super important. Culture, 5 C's. These are the things that I believe everybody is looking for these days: collaboration, community, caring for one another, communication, and then a culture that really cultivates a creative rewards and recognition program. Okay. So this isn't like rocket science. This isn't something that necessarily is new, but everything combined together in these 5 C's are what humanizes the workplace and will help employees not feel like you're treating them like a robot. Okay. So let's dig right in. The culture of empathy, ideally, it starts at the top and cascades throughout the organization. If you have a seat at the table and you have an opportunity to help your leadership team, your executive team understand the importance of this, it's amazing. And also, it starts with you. It starts with every single employee in an organization, that you can make a difference. You may not be able to make every single decision for the company, but you are part of the DNA that is weaving together the culture of empathy in your organization. So when companies humanize the workplace, like I said, it's not just about black and white policies or programs. It's about situational decision making and having empathy and talking through employee relations issues and saying, what about this? What about that? Did we consider this? Have we asked them this? Right? It's creating a conversation instead of just a decision based on a policy. So the other important thing here, that kind of summarizes this, like I said, I worked for Starbucks Human Resources years ago, and my manager at the time is now one of my business partners. His name is Cam Sorensen, and he taught me this truly. I thought I knew how to lead with heart before I got to Starbucks and worked with him, but then when I actually started working with the supply chain organization in, sometimes a difficult environment, this was even more important. So I like to say there are handbooks, laws, and compliance, and then there's the question of what's the right thing to do for the employee as well as for the company. It's always a balance of both, and our passion is to help our clients navigate what's the right thing to do. So if you all take one thing away from today, my heart is this, is that you are using your voice and, educating others on your team. And they don't even have to be in HR, but, what is the right thing to do for both, for the employee and for the company? And it's always a balance of navigating and deciding, what to do in a search situation that sometimes is gray. So I hope that this resonates with you guys. Oh, I see Brooke Sorensen. Yes, love that last name. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit more about my personal story. Back in 2015, this is my family, and my husband Chris hit his head on our car door. It was a super freak scenario where, you think hitting your head on a car door, that's not that big of a deal. Well, what actually happened was it's probably the 6th or 7th concussion he's had, because he was one of 4 boys when he was growing up. And so this concussion triggered a major concussion for his poor brain. And we ended up going, from living the American dream to all of a sudden he was not well. He was not well for a year, and he was not able to hardly, work, drive. Our little guy was 18 months at the time. My oldest was 5, almost 6. And it was a really tough time. We were living in the dark because his concussion provider, the doctor said that, that's what we needed to do in order to help his brain heal. Well, 5 neurologists later, we still didn't have answers after a year of this. And meanwhile, I'm working. I am caring for my family. I have become a sole provider at this point for my family because my husband can't work. And, I had to put on a face. I had to every day make a decision to put my big girl pants on, as I say, and, provide for my family and still continue to work. And I had so many people support me through this season, and they were my colleagues, my, clients, employers, all the things, right? And if I did not have that backing, it would have been a lot different of a scenario. And a year after we had stayed in the dark for so long, trying to get him to heal, we actually found that he had a benign brain tumor. It was drilling a hole through his skull. So you can imagine the severity of this. We ended up having an emergency surgery the next week after we found a surgeon that identified this was a tumor. It needed to come out. And that surgery was successful. Thank God it was benign. And what then progressed, though, throughout the last several years, this has kind of been going on for almost a decade now. He has had one brain surgery after another because of complications. So I have personally been able to work, this whole time through these crazy scenarios that my personal situation has imposed. This was not what we signed up for. But I had my employer, at the time, and now my consulting clients, like everybody has just been so supportive. And it's because of humanizing, the workplace and realizing that I have a life outside of work. So this is just an extreme situation, right? Of, wow, so many things that have gone on. I could talk to you guys for hours about this, but just keep in mind that people might show up to a presentation like this put together, right? But then when they go home, they're dealing with something that's like this. They may not be going home. They might be going straight to ICU, which was the case here. So I'm pleased to report my husband is doing much, much better, knock on wood right now. He's driving again. He's going back to school to get his undergrad because he never really needed to finish that. He worked for Microsoft and Oracle. And so all this to say, that's our story. Everybody has a story. So what is your story? What is the story of the colleague that you sit next to at work? What is the story of your manager or your direct reports, right? Like everybody has a story outside of work. So I just really want to encourage you guys that even though we all have job descriptions, we all have titles. There is a person, there's a human being and a heart behind each of us. There's a heartbeat, right? So I hope that this was encouraging to you in the sense that, you just want to be thinking that everybody has something outside of work that they might be struggling with. All right. So how does this apply actually to the real world too, right? Like here's another example. This is an actual story of a scenario that happened. And I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but this is real life. This is what actually happens in the world, right? That we're navigating. So Rick was an employee who died after 20 years as a senior staff member at his company. And when he passed away, leaders at the company decided to share remembering Rick stories for 21 days. At the end of those 21 days, they gathered all the images and texts that had been shared and published a memory book for Rick's widow. Like, how awesome is that? I mean, if that widow, if that were me, I would have just been overwhelmed with gratitude. That is going above and beyond. That's keeping the human in human resources, right? And so just keep these types of things in mind when you do have scenarios come up at work, that there usually is something that you can do that doesn't require a budget, that requires empathy and intention and thought. So yes, Gary, sharing is caring. And yes, we absolutely all have a story that creates our resilience. I love that, Artesia. So moving on, you guys, what are the benefits of doing things like this? What are the benefits of, Rick's situation and what the executives of that company did? Well, it's the feeling that you get, right? For everybody to know, like, we care, we're pouring into this poor widow that has just lost her spouse. But it's greater than that. It's got long-term effects where if you create that culture of empathy, you're going to see increased employee engagement, lower turnover, employer brand and company recognition. People are talking about that company that took care of Rick's wife, right? And then ultimately it's going to have an impact on the bottom line, period. So these are the impacts of the company. And now let's talk about what the impacts are to the employee themselves. I don't know about you, but I feel seen if someone identifies, and asks me, how are you doing? It's not to be invasive. They just truly care. Just that simple question, how are you doing? That goes a long way with people. And that's at any level, by the way. If you ask that of a COO or an executive assistant, it does not matter. We are all people and human beings. And so employees feel seen. This also will result in loyalty, right? And it's going to have a positive impact on that employee's well-being. Mental health, that's something that, thank God, is being talked about more these days because it is a huge challenge as we are facing workplace situations and the things that people do deal with at home. And so when a company supports the employee in all of the aspects of their life, you're going to see an impact to their well-being. They feel cared for. Their partner and spouse or their kids, family, they're also impacted, right? So it cascades and trickles down to all different types of relationships that the employee and their, family has to the organization. So you just cannot go wrong with having that culture of humanizing and, empathizing in the workplace. Okay. Wow, we could talk about this for days because there are so many different scenarios. I'm gonna just drop these and then I would love for you guys in the comments to share too, like I teed this off earlier. What are some scenarios that either you've navigated or someone that you're working with now are navigating? These are, kind of quote unquote good scenarios they're navigating, and also they are life changes. So you've got a birth of a child. Oh man, when my boys were born, we were rocked, right? Adoption, so significant. Foster parenting, again, so significant. Planning a wedding, blending a family after becoming a step parent. I mean, so many different life events that can just really rock people's worlds, even in good situations. Elderly aging parents, becoming a caregiver, whether you wanted to or not sometimes, right? Like I was sharing with my personal story. all kinds of grief and loss, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. A new puppy might be keeping you up at night. What are you guys experiencing? Let's see. Oh, an employee home flooded after the storm. Yes, that is so devastating. I actually had that happen last summer, and we were displaced out of my home for 3 months and lived in a hotel. So I totally get you there. That is rocking everybody's world when that happens. Um, oh yeah, sleep deprived to the new puppy. Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry about the loss of your daughter. Gosh, you guys. Divorce, yes. Illness from plastic surgery botch. Oh my goodness. Yes. Significant other deploying to another country. Oh, thank them for their service. Yeah, there are so many different scenarios that we're navigating, right? So the point with all of this is that life happens and we are still expected to do our jobs and to keep our jobs and perform well. And that is a lot. It can feel a lot. So I want to bring in a little happy picture here for you guys, because that's a lot of heavy stuff that we're talking through. This is my little puppy. His name is Rocky. He is a Cavapoo and he's turning 1 on Friday. So drop me in the comments what kind of dog or animal or pet you guys have. Would love to know. Yeah, puppies, this guy kept me awake for like 2, 3 months. Oh my gosh, it was a lot. So even though it was my choice, oh my gosh, I did not realize how much work it was going to be and how sleep deprived I would be. So there are certainly scenarios that are not just the, difficult ones of grief and loss, but adding a family member, a baby, it is challenging. Yorkies, golden retrievers, so fun, you guys. Dachshund, golden doodles, too fun. Labradane, I don't know what that is. Hey, Kimmer. Okay, so we love our dogs. I just wanted to bring in mine to, like I said, share some happy, because there are so many different things that are difficult as we talk about this, right? Such as struggling with infertility, loss of a child, parent, friend, spouse, divorce, you guys just mentioned, financial devastation, cancer, inability to drive, onset of a disability. That can happen so quickly for people. Loss of a home or displaced from a home, from a flood, like someone mentioned. That chronic pain. I mean, I'm getting up there in my age and I'm starting to feel that. But some people, it's really debilitating on a daily basis. A relationship breakup, a strained relationship with family and friends. So you guys, we could, like I said, talk about this for days. The point being, all of this stuff is, we try to set it aside when we do go to our day jobs, but sometimes it does impact your work. Sometimes it does impact an employee's attendance. I'll never forget when we were, back in the day in the supply chain manufacturing area in HR, we had, attendance policies and, different levels of performance management if someone missed too much work or, was late or whatever. And there was an employee that, until we asked the right questions, we just thought that they were late. We just thought that they were, not caring about their job, that they were not putting in the right amount of effort or activity. Well, in reality, when we started asking questions and uncovering layers of the why behind the tardies and, leaving work early or missing a day or whatever, right? We've come to find out that he had a really sick child at home, and we did not know this. He hadn't shared that with us yet. And so when we got to know the human being behind the attendance policy that we were managing, that is when we were able to have a conversation to say, oh gosh, okay, we need to help you through this process. What can we do as an HR function and team? What can your manager do to support you and your child, right? Instead of having that employee feel so isolated and like they were failing the attendance program, right? So absolutely, there's a story behind every decision that you might make. Now, certainly there are so many times that these things are warranted to, let someone go because they have not attended, and performed their job, of course. But when you get behind the why and understand what's going on, you might learn a little bit more than you didn't know before, right? So just keep that in mind. We are all humans. We're all dealing with different types of grief, loss, etc. Okay. Now, how do we lead employees that are going through this difficulty, right? Like so many examples that you guys have shared today. So, what do you do? In my experience, you first listen. You are that sounding board. You're the safe place, especially if you're an HR professional. You are a really, a confidant for them to come to you and share what's going on in their life. However, you are not to fix and solve for their problems. That's where employee assistance plans come into play, counseling recommendations. And so just know that you can absolutely listen and take in the information and then provide resources, right? So listen first, understand their needs, give them some time if they need it. If that's also something that the business can offer them, perhaps it's a, leave of absence of some sort. You might also be creative in job sharing or job restructuring. I have a friend that she and another coworker of hers ended up doing a job share program, and it worked out tremendously for both of them. And they did that for years. And so some companies can be flexible in ways that might also support, one employee and another at the same time. You can also ask for your team's input. How do you divvy up work if you want to care for someone that's going through grief or loss? Maybe you can divvy up work and, temporarily help that employee take a administrative leave. And then HR and leadership can determine different leave scenarios for the employee. There are so many ways now to be, somewhat creative with leaves of absences, whether it's unpaid or paid. Of course, adhering to state, local, federal, et cetera, laws, but there's like the job sharing program, right? If someone needs to go pare down their time from 40 hours to 20 hours, let's look at that. Is that an option? Okay. All right. Um, I am going to move us into now some of the programs that we were talking about, actually implementing in the workplace that you all can take back to share with your leaders. Or if you're a decision maker, you're in HR, perhaps you can consider these. So these are some best in class programs. How many of you have an employee assistance program? If you could put it in the chat. And if you don't know if you have one, you definitely need to find out. But hopefully, yes, okay. Great, I love to see it. Sometimes people don't know they have access to one and they need to work with their benefits broker because typically, the broker these days has a specific EAP that they can offer to your employees. So, reminder, however, you guys all know that you have one. I'm not sure that your employees all understand what is available to them with an employee assistance plan. So think about that and maybe survey, informally, formally, some employees on your team or your company to say, do you all know about this incredible resource we have? It's usually 24/7. It comes with a variety of different amazing benefits. And yes, various mental health benefits in addition to EAP that a lot of the programs offer these days. So if you have not shared your employee assistance plan information with your teams in a while, please take a minute to, send a note out, put it in your Slack channel, however you get the communication out to your employees. But EAP plans are underutilized in my opinion, and we try to solve for things in the workplace, even HR professionals do, that should, be referred to an employee assistance plan instead. So yeah, great offerings and so many different things that they can help you with, including, how to research uh, places for your aging loved ones, to consider like retirement homes and things like that, senior care. So you cannot over communicate, in my opinion, the employee assistance plan information because your employees will just forget about it, that they have access to it. Another awesome program, I'll share a slide with you in a minute, is a PTO donation program. This might be something that you want to consider in your workplace. And, there are some administrative things to consider with this, but certainly it's an option to think about as far as, allowing employees an option that definitely will humanize the workplace to allow them that time off they need if they're maybe out of PTO, for example. Rewards and recognition are so important. We talk about it all the time these days. But when you really think about it, it's humanizing those. It's making them something that resonates with that employee, that excites them. And so we'll talk about, some of that in a minute. Employee resource groups, ERGs, and then employee interest groups. So if you guys don't mind, actually, oh, hold on that. We'll ask that in a minute. But yeah, utilize your EAP. I can't stress this enough. And then understand what benefits are included for your covered dependents too. For example, if you have a son that's struggling with substance abuse or whatever, even sometimes if they're not on your actual plan, on your medical plan, sometimes your dependent might be covered. So just understand who's eligible for contacting and working with your EAP. And like I said, don't take that burden on. You absolutely need to refer them to the EAP. Oh, good. I'm so glad you guys are promoting your EAP. That's awesome. Yeah, you cannot do it enough. Okay. So PTO, this is something to consider, that employees can donate your unused PTO to help others. This can be a really great way for employees to also feel like there's something they can do for that person. Say someone's diagnosed with breast cancer and they're going to have to be out for their treatments for the next 8 weeks or whatever, 2 days a week, whatever. Is there a way that you could come together as a team and donate your PTO? So there's some administrative work behind the scenes that would need to happen with that, approvals and et cetera, to make sure it's fair and equitable and all that. So why is recognition important? We're going to talk about the rewards and recognition piece now. 22 million workers, which is approximately 70% of the US population, are extremely negative or actively disengaged. This is a problem. This is a challenge. I don't know about you, but I agree with this statistic because I see it every day with my clients. I've seen it in HR for 25 years. It is tiring to try and help people be positive, be engaged. And so it's costing the US economy between 250 and 300 billion every year in lost productivity alone. So when you add in like workplace injury, illness, chemo, all these things, we're talking about like people out of the workplace for just grief and loss and all the things. This adds up to nearly 10% of the US GDP. That's significant. So we have to be talking about why recognition is important. Disengaged employees are, it's just sad. I don't know how else to say it. It's just sad. Like I shared earlier, I have a heart for people and I want people to be happy in their jobs and fulfilled and feel valued. And like the candidate told me this morning, she doesn't want to feel like she's on the hamster wheel. And so these statistics validate all of that, so we have a role to play in this. And as you think about rewarding individuals, these are just some ways that, again, I want you to think about what can you take back to your workplace today. Perhaps you could have every new hire or employee on your team create like an employee intake form. So this would be things like, what's your favorite drink? Do you like to be rewarded in front of groups, or do you prefer a handwritten note, and a day at the spa, basically, like something more like one-on-one motivation reward that they would receive. So not everybody is motivated by the same thing. If you gave me, a golf outing for example, I'd be like, cool, thanks, but I don't really golf. If you sent me to the spa or you sent me to a tennis event or something like that, that is personal to me, I would be so grateful. I would be like, oh my gosh, they really thought about me and got to know me as an individual. So, is anyone doing this yet where they're finding out initially upon, hire even what the employee has for preferences, and that way you can reward and tailor the reward. Maybe it's their favorite candy bar that is sitting at their desk upon day one, or if it's remote, you send them their favorite donuts day one, whatever. This sounds so simple, but it goes such a long way. People will talk about your company on LinkedIn. If you set them up for success from day one and you recognize they are a person, they have preferences, and they like to do different things, that will show that they feel seen, and they'll tell people about it for sure. This could be a like online form. It doesn't have to be anything complicated, but it's just a way to collect data that will help you personalize the rewards experience. Okay, so no matter the size of your organization, you can create a strong recognition program. When I worked in nonprofit, we had a very minimal budget to do this, and we still had a lot of fun with it. We actually created coupons and would give out like on the spot coupons to people when we saw them doing something that went above and beyond or that aligned with the core value of the organization. We also gave them to managers so they could give them out to not just people on their team, anyone in the company. And so we made like a recognition basket. It had things in it for the manager. It included thank you notes, so that they had actual handwritten thank you notes in their desk that they could write. That still goes a long way. Even in today's virtual setting, you can pop a card in the mail for someone to read, and that does actually go a really long way, especially when you take the time to find the address and put the stamp on it and, send someone some snail mail. So, the recognition basket was something that we implemented on a low budget. We would give out tickets for like, oh, you get a 2 hour, early release on Friday if they were a non-exempt employee, for example. So lots of different ways that you can create strong recognition programs. Time off, that's something that you could consider working with your team to see if there's an option for additional time off. I don't know about you, but everybody can use a day off, or even, like I said, early release Friday for a couple hours. That goes a really long way. If you're recognizing, especially if someone's worked a ton and you say, you know what, I've seen you working your booty off. I want you to take, next Friday off or whatever. And it's a surprise that goes so far. Handwritten notes we've talked about, a gift card to their favorite restaurant, movie tickets, that's a really fun one, especially when it's 108 right now in Texas. All this to say, work with your HR and accounting teams, of course, to understand the fringe benefits if they're taxable or not. But absolutely don't use the administrative burden, or whatnot from these different programs that you might think would be associated with them, because there are certainly ways to still make all this happen. Team recognition. So individuals need to be, recognized, but teams certainly love that recognition. And oftentimes in my experience, the public recognition for a team absolutely does go a long way. You can give each of them something to reward them to that doesn't cost a lot, to show gratitude, because while a thank you is nice for, hitting a huge milestone, they would love a cash bonus or, a day off or something as well. So think of that, depending on what the team goal is that they've achieved, or if the recognition is that you're wanting to put out there. And a lot of you have mentioned you have these channels, these platforms that you use. So if you have a social media channel, for example, you could share the team's success publicly. That goes a really long way. People can reshare on their Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever, that, gosh, they just got recognized in their company, and they're going to post about your company. And that's, again, your employer brand that you're putting out there. Have a party. There's a lot of partiers here, it sounds like. So you can throw a party. Again, it can be virtual. You can figure out ways to do that. Have a happy hour, like I said, where you send in Uber Eats and everybody orders their own. During the pandemic years, we had a chef come in and do a cooking class for everybody. So you can still do things like that, even though we're post-pandemic years. You can still absolutely do things that are fun and recognize the team, and just bring in the human element again to rewards and recognition. One last example here that I want to share with you, again, not being paid by Verizon to share about their brand, but they are a company that does this really well. They humanize the employee experience in a way that is just really amazing to me as an HR professional. They have right on their Life at Verizon page, their communities. I talked, one of the 5 C's I talked about culture is community, collaboration, communication, right? Our communities, they put here, by collaborating through our ERGs, they call the employees teamers. Teamers find connection in their differences and similarities, empowering them to bring their whole and authentic selves every day. So, wow, I can, as a outsider, come look at this page and see, okay, Verizon wants to connect their people. As huge of a company as this is, they have a mission to connect their people. And how they do that, these ERGs. So actually down here, you can see it's their mission and values. And then I'm sorry. there's a slide missing here for Verizon, but essentially what it does is it shows you, you can type in something here to show their job, but there's also down here a page that talks about the different ERGs that they have and you know, who you might relate to. So this is one for Charles Schwab. And these again are the different groups they have: Asian Professionals Inclusion Network, Black Professionals, the Charles Schwab Abilities Network, Families at Schwab, International Professionals. Like they're trying to reach every group, military vets. And so you guys can see how this attracts people not only to work there, but to engage in these communities. More than 30% of Schwab employees belong to at least one ERG. So overall, all of the content that we've talked about today, what is the result of this, right? You're going to see lower absenteeism. You're going to see lower turnover, probably fewer safety incidents if you have employees that are engaged, happy, rested. They are taking care of their mental and physical health. You're going to see higher customer ratings and higher profitability and productivity in the end. So ultimately, your people are going to feel like they work as a human being and not just a robot, which I think is the goal for all of us, as we are either HR professionals or some sort of influencer in our space in what we do. So I hope that this was helpful for you all.